maybe you could talk a teeny bit about your journey from nursing to your position at UNH to start.
Yeah, my journey into becoming a nurse practitioner probably started back when I was a student in a baccalaureate program in the mid-'70s, early '70s, in that there was a community health faculty I had whose full-time work was a nurse practitioner in a primary care practice. It was in Durham, North Carolina. She was certainly dependent on the physician practice. There was no prescriptive authority or no third-party reimbursement, but she did take care of a caseload of challenging patients, mostly with severe behavioral disorders. And I remember thinking at the time that I might want to be a midwife, nurse midwife.
But I remember going to the labor and delivery unit and thinking, this is really scary, because it was 4 labor beds on stretchers. It was absolutely a non-optimal labor and delivery experience, which certainly not what then came to be the experience of pregnancy
And intrapartum care eventually. But so I went off and worked in a rural practice after graduation. I worked for the Indian Health Service. And I was in a hospital, a small 14-bed hospital as a registered nurse, a new graduate. And I was part of a relatively young care team, new physicians, new nurses, essentially in the middle of nowhere, caring for a very high-risk community. And we really came to understand how much we depend on each other to grow our knowledge together and to begin to solve problems that nobody really had one answer to. And I think at that point, my eyes opened about that nobody owns any one piece of knowledge, that nursing is medical knowledge, medical knowledge is nursing knowledge, and you need to bring forth to the problem whatever you can at that time and be open to learning to solve the next, to work on the next problem as it arises. So with that, I did find my home in community health nursing and rural practice. So I became a public health nurse. I served in Aboriginal communities in northern Canada, as well as, again, in northern Nevada. And I saw pretty early on that I wanted to become a nurse practitioner. And so I did become a nurse practitioner at Vanderbilt. I finished in 1980. And at that point, the programs were very different than they are now. They were somewhat less structured, but the organization principle was really immersion in clinical practice and helping you learn how to solve problems and bringing together a lot of what was traditionally considered medical knowledge base, but also our nursing foundation, our nursing interpersonal skills. And I saw the difference between what the nurses brought to primary care practice and what the physicians did. And one of the most formative experiences I had in graduate school was working with Vicki Henderson and Susan Sizemore, who were leaders in trying to develop an independent certified nurse midwifery practice in Vanderbilt, in Nashville at the time. And because of physician obstructionist behavior, they could not, they did not succeed in their business plan. But they were caring for high-risk women in Nashville and doing an excellent job of it. So leaving there, coming to New Hampshire, I had a vision of what being a nurse practitioner was to be, but I wasn't that aware of policy. I wasn't that aware of what I could do in the legislative arena, but I did get involved in NHNPA, and I did start to do a little bit of work with you guys. And I have to say, I was always in awe of those of you that were on the front line actually working directly with policy and legislative change, and extremely grateful for what you created in our state for those of us that came after you. I did work up at Dartmouth for 4 years as a nurse practitioner in pediatric oncology and hematology. I love that work. It was as a nurse clinician / nurse practitioner. I believe we had a strong group of nurses that worked in those roles up at Dartmouth, and it was our strength was because we had a strong nursing foundation as well as a primary care background.